about the base and Bigfoot, and he's like, I know exactly what she's talking about because I saw some of the stuff and I know what's there. But of course, it had never been reported because, you don't want to interfere with your military career and have people think you're crazy.
Yeah. Wow. That is interesting. And this is an Army base, Air Force base. What kind of a base is this in your area there?
It is an Army base.
All right. And was there any occasion at all for you in law enforcement to have any interaction with this Air Force or this base at that point?
We actually interact with it quite a bit, but I also have clearance to go on the base. My late husband was military, so I can go on the base easily.
Ah, yeah. So that obviously gives you some familiarity with how things work on a military base and how this interesting. So did you decide to weave in this biological experimentation happening on the base yourself, or had you heard about something like that in the past?
That's something that I just decided to put in there. Instead of having an Area 51 where it is all aliens and UFOs, have it be cryptids and failed genetic experiments and different things that have been collected and are either being housed there because they're too dangerous to leave out for to have contact with the general populace, or for their own safety in some cases.
Yeah. Wow. And had you yourself been interested in like the paranormal during your career as a law enforcement officer, or was this something that you picked up just because you read that article?
I have always loved the paranormal. That was something that I grew up with, always watching shows and hearing stories about, haunted houses and encounters and things that had happened with my own family members. So that's always been a part of my life. And I actually grew up in a house that was most likely haunted, or at least the property was haunted. So, I grew up with paranormal and different things. So that's always been a part of my life.
Well, yeah, it sounds like at least you've got some experience for this kind of genre anyway. And have you written anything prior to this? Did you like to do short stories or any kind of things that you would publish in the past before you did these book series?
Never. Even in school, in grade school and high school, it was a matter of how much do I have to write and still get an A. That was the goal, was to get an A, but to write as little as possible to do it. I hated to write.
Yeah, and obviously nowadays do you keyboard or do you handwrite everything at this point?
I keyboard.
And of course, that is something that you either have to learn young or you have to acquire later in life. How was it for you learning how to keyboard? I remember in my high school, for some reason, I decided to take a typing class. Ended up being like the best thing I ever did as far as, being able to use a skill after high school. Are you there, Liz?
I'm here.
Oh, good. Yeah. So did you pick up the keyboard skills later on in life, or was that something you always had?
I always did at least some typing. I picked them up probably really when I started into law enforcement, was doing a lot of reports and things. And for a brief time, I was actually one of those annoying people who calls you and says, and tries to get you to take the surveys, and you have to be able to type exactly what the person says into the comments at the speed they're telling you. So I had to learn really fast.
Well, that'll do it. It's even harder than stenography, where you're creating symbols as you go. You have to write every word down. That's interesting. Yeah. So the whole idea of you wanting to write this book, is it something that you kind of have decided that you needed to do because of your physical condition, that you've been forced to be less mobile, or was this something that you probably would have done in any case, at this point in your life?
It was definitely because of my injuries. I hate the fact that I can't be as active as I was, and I have like lift restrictions, and I'm told all the things that I cannot do, and instead of what I can do. And if I ask, so what can I do? The answer is, I don't know. Whatever doesn't hurt. Well, when it hurts to breathe on certain days, that makes it a little hard to follow that rule. So activity kind of purpose.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do this, if you will. Will you kind of describe, first of all, the main protagonist character in your book, and tell us a little bit about her and basically some of the background that you said that she was a deputy, and then all of a sudden steps into the head position there.
Right. Her name is Lindsay Gold, and she just kind of gets dropped into this. She thinks, okay, I'm going to take over as sheriff. There's going to be all the administrative and all that stuff that is not fun but necessary. And she walks into it and realizes a few days in, something is very wrong with all of the paperwork that has been filed with the state by the sheriff, who has quit unexpectedly. Things are completely wrong. She has to redo everything. Investigations start on the state level with that. And then she starts to get these calls into the sheriff's department about monsters and these things happening that she just kind of sits back and thinks, no, there's no way this is happening. They must be out drinking or smoking something and seeing these things. They can't be real. And then when a teenager comes into the sheriff's department injured by one of them, she realizes we have a problem.
Yeah. And obviously, does she have to convince her colleagues that this is something that they need to investigate, or do some of her colleagues in the book already know what's going on? I don't know.
No one outside of her husband knows what's going on, and he's telling anything. He's acting like he has no clue what's going on for a while until things start to progress and they realize, okay, this is putting people in danger. I have to say something. And he starts to tell a little bit to the sheriff that, okay, something may have happened, so these calls might go on for a while. And if you get these calls into the sheriff's department, just do a quick little write-up, say where it happened, when it happened, generally what it was. Don't go in details, and tell me what it is and hand it to me. I'll take care of it. And so, I mean, it's pretty obvious he knows what's going on, but he's not telling anyone.
And does Lindsay have an inkling that he knows what's going on, or does it take quite a while for her to figure out that he might be involved somehow?
Oh, she's pretty quick to figure out he has something to do with it, but she doesn't say much about it because they do have that understanding. Everything since their first date, she has known everything he does is classified. He can't talk about it, so she's not asked questions. She's understood that and kind of let it go, but she understands really fast that he has something to do with it. As soon as he says there's an incident on the base, he knows exactly what's going on.
And that is because he is military, or he is a federal officer knowing what's going on. I can't remember the specifics about what his background was.
He is former military, but he is in charge of the program on the base that has caused this whole problem. And he kind of refers to it as the agency, the program, his facility, that kind of thing. And his title is agent, just to clarify. And, that way he can say he's public relations, he's working, something like that. He introduces himself as Agent Gold.
Agent Ren Gold, right? Is that his first name?
Yes, Ren.
And that's, how do you spell that?
W-R-E-N.
Yeah, interesting name. How did you come up with that name?
That's one of those where it's kind of a good question. I wanted something different and a name that was short, but also that could be kind of an abbreviation for this big, long, ostentatious name that he obviously hates and never goes by it. So his full name is Renfield, which is a family name, and he hates it, and so he goes by Ren.
Very good. Have you known any Renfields in your own life? Is this something that you brought out of the past yourself, or do you just kind of hear it and decide to adopt it?
I have never met anyone with the name Renfield, so I'm not entirely sure where it came from.
It sounds to me that you are the type of writer that I like to emulate as well, where you just sit down and you have a quiet moment and you just kind of throw some words on the paper, and all of a sudden it kind of leads you on a path that you not necessarily know ahead of time where you're going. And these kinds of names and characters almost kind of invent themselves as you go. Is that been your experience?
Absolutely. I plan nothing. When it gets to the point of where someone calls in to report that there's been a creature or something sighted, I have to stop and come up with a name for the person, and also, in many cases, stop and think, okay, what kind of creature do I want this to be? And actually make that up as I'm writing the story.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a... I think that's the really pure way to write, without some preconceived ideas or formats or outlines. It's almost as if you're just kind of downloading information and inspiration as you go. And it's amazing what kind of comes out on the paper. Sometimes you wonder, where did that come from, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. And there are times where I've been writing something and I read it and I start laughing, or something. It's like, how did I even come up with that? But it's worked, so I've left it in, and it goes from there.
Now, you mentioned that you wrote the first book. Let's mention the title to the first book, by the way. Let's do that now.
The first book is 51 The Beginning.
The Beginning. And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
let's explain to the audience where the term 51 came for your book title, and how you came about naming it that.